Time, definitely time. That feeling of being in debt is horrible and I don't want it. But my problem with jobs and with the 9 to 5 is the pressure that we have to be in one. If you had a mortgage-free house, you could do it for about three to 4,000 zloty per month, which is about 800 £800 per month.
When we talk about immigrants and numbers, we stop seeing people. But when we put faces to the stories, we can finally feel.
Hi, Anna. Thank you for being on my podcast. I'm excited about this podcast. So you are from the UK, moved to Poland. So tell me why you are in Poland.
Honestly, there are two main reasons. The first is my family. So my family are pretty much all in Poland now. So I wanted to be close to them. But the second reason is finances. So actually, I spent pretty much the majority of my life living in London, and I always planned to leave London. I never wanted to stay. I hated the hustle and bustle. I hated how expensive, ridiculously expensive, the cost of living in London was. So I always planned to get out. I always wanted to go live somewhere that was far cheaper. And whilst my parents were in England, I was thinking it was probably going to be, I don't know, Scotland or something, somewhere close, but with a far better cost of living. But then my parents made the decision to move back to Poland after like 25 years or something. So after that, I decided, okay, maybe a village in Poland will do. So it was those two main things really that made me move to Poland.
When did you move to Poland? How many years already?
About 4 years now.
4 years? Wow. So,
Crazy.
and do you consider an immigrant or an expat in Poland?
I think like an expat because I feel very British and I don't know, I don't feel like an immigrant, especially since I speak the language really well on both sides and I have dual citizenship. So I feel like expat feels more like the definition, but it's a very weird scenario.
Right. I think it's fair since you were born in the UK, right? That you feel like that and you could be very much an expat. Not really, I'm not a big fan of labels, but people use it. So whatever you feel, at least in my mind, doesn't really matter. But yeah, I mean, you could pretty much be an expat. So that's mean you think you'll be there for another year or two, or you have other plans? So what's the goal?
At the moment, my only plan is that I might spend a year or two back in England, but actually long term, probably stay in Poland. So the whole idea, everything I've done was to achieve financial independence, to not have to work and to be able to retire early. Although retiring is a very misleading term here because I'm not planning to sit on the beach and sip cocktails. But I wanted that kind of freedom to work how and when I want. So I've achieved that in Poland. And if I was to go back to England, I wouldn't have that. I would have the sort of pressure to work for a long time again. So I've been thinking about sort of going back for a year or two, mostly because I've drained my finances more than I expected because I purchased some land and got into debt to do it. And it's the quickest way for me to sort of get back into a very well-paid 9 to 5 in finance, like what I used to do, and build back up those sort of emergency funds and pay off that debt and get back to the financial place I was in when I first moved here. So that's been kind of going through my head a little bit. But long term, I probably wouldn't go back. I would probably stay here.
So you're a content creator, and I saw one of your videos, and I cover a lot of immigration, cultural type of stuff. You do a similar thing, but from a financial perspective. And I was like, man, this is amazing. This is a genius person.
Thank you.
Because when you think about it, the reason why immigrants leave is they're looking for a better financial life. So why not seeing immigration from that perspective? So I want to ask you questions about that because now you left, your parents went to England for a better life, I'm assuming, but now they're all back in Poland. Are you back in Poland? So explain to me, why is that, why they went back, right? If you can say a little bit why they went back. And then what are the difference between England and Poland, financially speaking, right? From an immigrant perspective.
Mm-hmm. So my parents made the decision to go back after Brexit, and we sort of went back for a Christmas to Poland to see family. And it was the first time in a very long time that we'd all gone together and the whole family was there and everything. And during this time, they also got to see all their friends. And I think they realized that actually, if they moved back to Poland, they could buy a house and not have a mortgage, whereas they had a mortgage back in London. So they very quickly, actually, I think they made the decision in January. And by June, my mum had already moved, because they already had the house. So it was a very intense half a year. And I guess financially, it's in terms of earnings, you make a lot less in Poland, which is partly why I'm thinking, another year or two in England. But I think generally the quality of life feels a little bit better. I think you don't feel like you need as much here. And despite lower earnings, your cost of living is also a little bit lower. So it doesn't feel as bad, I suppose. So yeah, I think I've noticed that they are far happier and they don't regret their decision to go back at all. Even though when we first moved and throughout most of the time we lived in England, we weren't planning to go, like I definitely wasn't planning to go back to Poland. And neither were my parents. So it was a very surprising decision for them and for me. But it just sort of happened, when Brexit happened and people started to feel a little bit unwelcome and they could see the economy struggling and they were like, okay, maybe this is a good time to go have a house without a mortgage. And, they did the right thing because mortgages went up so much
Right.
after because of COVID and everything else.
So I don't know if you can answer this question, but when you talk about England, it sounds a lot like the United States, right? So if I'm from Argentina, by the way. So when you compare Argentina with Poland, for what it sounds like, Argentina is a cash society. To get a credit card is like almost impossible. You gotta be rich, and if you're rich, why you don't need a credit card? What is the United States economy move and survives in credit, right? So I just wonder, do you think your parents or even you, are you chasing time, or are you chasing money? What is your reasons?
Time, definitely time. I think part of the whole reason for both them and me was just to have more time, because if you are constantly in debt, you're constantly feeling the stress of working and being sort of under the thumb of work. Whereas now, they don't have to worry about the mortgage and they have like no debt, which is amazing. They still work, but it's very different working when you're just working for living, not for paying off debt. And
Right.
for me, it was very similar. But then obviously I got into debt again to buy this land next to me, which I really, really wanted this land. And, land doesn't depreciate and I can always sell it, but I don't want to. It's reminded me that feeling of being in debt is horrible and I don't want it. You've got the pressure of, okay, I have to make X amount of money every month to make these payments. And what you said earlier, I agree. Poland is far more against credit cards and against sort of getting into debt unless you absolutely have to. So the only people really that I see getting into debt is for mortgages. But there are still loads of people who will live in multi-generational homes, live with their parents, their grandparents, and save up money and take the time to build a house and have their own house without a mortgage, which is amazing. Whereas, the UK very much felt like just very quickly get into debt and, pay for this and get a mortgage as quickly as possible. And obviously that's massively generalizing, but it is how I've seen it.
So yeah, Argentina is very similar that way. Parents, they usually have a house for you, or they have a bigger lot where you can even build a house in the same lot. So so the entire neighborhood, basically, the whole family lives in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it is. So yeah, buying a house is almost it's hard to get a loan to buy a house, right? And if you do, you basically have the financial money to do it. So yeah, we don't have a lot of that. So, but yeah, I think time is that's what attract me also about your content, because being spending 30 years of my life or more already, 35 in the United States, I'm trapped in this loop, right in this cycle where I'm never free. Like I never had time, right? I don't have any time. I'm constantly buying, and I build this financial life. It's not really mine, because in the US nobody owns anything. But yeah, you get used to the luxury. But until when? Like you get worn out, right?
Exactly. It's massive burnout, and, that whole vision of the rat race and being on a hamster wheel, I have nothing against working. Like I'm not, like I said, I'm not planning to sit and do nothing. Even if I could live off of my investments and never work again, I couldn't do that. I couldn't just sit and do nothing. I think jobs are great, but my problem with jobs and with the 9 to 5 is the pressure that we have to be in one. When we feel like, I felt very different when I worked in England and I felt a toxic environment or something and I felt stressed and I just needed a break and I couldn't take one. Whereas now I'm in a position where I work for myself, and if I need a break, I take it. And I had a couple of 9 to 5s in Poland, mostly to dabble with like different careers, because I spent my whole life in finance and I got these 2 opportunities here that were so very different. I was like, why not? So one was, for example, in like events planning and marketing, which was really fun. And any point I knew that if it got too much or if they annoyed me too much or if it got toxic, I could say bye. And just that peace of mind when you're in a job and you're like, I don't have to be here, is fabulous. It just changes your whole attitude to that job and makes it so much more enjoyable.
Right. Absolutely. Anna, look, I interview a lot of people, and there's so many people right now looking for that kind of life. Like, where you get more time, not credit. You are creating content based on that kind of stuff. You are in finance. Do you think you see more people now looking for that kind of life? Are people hitting you up like, Anna, how did you do this? Is that frequently?
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of people sort of messaging me saying that I inspired them, that I showed them that you can achieve it and that they're thinking about how to achieve it. And actually, the whole thing really inspired me in a bit of a circle, because I've actually signed up to do a qualification. So I'm studying at the moment to be a financial advisor so that I can manage people's finances and actually give them like proper, specific to them advice, which is a regulated activity in the UK. So I need to have the proper qualifications to do it if I want to sort of do individual one-on-one sort of work. But I get so much joy from helping people that I was like, okay, this feels like the right path for me, because I didn't hate finance. I hated the corporate world of finance. I hated working for companies and feeling like, oh, it doesn't matter anyway what I do. Whereas with personal finance, you can see that it matters because you can see the person that you're helping. I think more and more people are just getting fed up of how life is.
Right. I have another question for you in regards to finance, because it's actually a topic that I'm very interested in, because I met a lot of people doing the same thing, not actually doing finance, but uh, helping people, retire early, that kind of stuff, or leave the hamster wheels type of situation that you're talking about. But I think a lot of people, the main thing why they don't make that step, and I can use myself as an example, is money, right? You like, I'm in a hamster wheel and I have all this stuff. How much money do I need? Like if I want to retire, like if I want to go to Poland, for example, I think I can apply that to many countries, because they're very similar. Not every place is like the US or England. I've never been in England, but I'm assuming based on what you're telling me. But how much money you need to retire in Poland, for example? What is a lot? What is very little?
So, I mean, it obviously depends on the kind of lifestyle that you want. But for me, the cost of the house that I built from scratch, basically from the first brick to all of the furniture and everything, it cost me just over £100,000 to build, which is, mortgage free. It's about 88 meters squared. So it's not the smallest, but it's not the biggest. And I chose a simple design to make the costs cheaper. And it's more than enough for me. And then in terms of how much it costs to live, I would say if you are willing to live just a very basic life, then you could definitely do it. If you had a mortgage-free house, you could do it for about three to 4,000 zloty per month, which is about 800 pound per month.
Wow. Wow. If I tell you how much my cost of living here, you will laugh. $800, like, man. Oh, yeah. Wow.
So I used to know back when I first started YouTube, actually, I should reach out to this person, but I used to know someone who was married to a Polish girl, actually, and they were sort of building up their portfolio in the States and actually sort of seeing how much they get per month so that they could move to Poland and then live off of that. And it's very, well, maybe not very easy, that's oversimplifying it, but it's far easier to do if you are earning in pounds or dollars.
Wow. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. That was incredible information. I love it. I think the audience will love that. Let's dive into culture. How is the life like in Poland compared to England, right? Is it a fast-paced life? It's more laid back, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I should highlight actually that I do live in a small town on the outskirts of a small town. I'm sure if you went to like Warsaw or Krakow or something, then you would have pretty similar fast pace. But generally, the rest of Poland is much more sort of chilled, more sort of let's appreciate life, let's actually not sort of live to work, but work to live. And they have, I've seen, you know, I mentioned the 2 9-to-5s that I had here. It was very, very sort of come 5 o'clock, people actually leave. Like,
Right.
it's not the sort of norm that people stay longer and they care more about their jobs. No, it's like, nope, this is what I'm getting paid to do. This is what I'm doing. 5 o'clock, I'm going. Like, I'm living my life. I'm seeing my family. You know, people really value family time here and sort of sitting down at a table and having a meal together and having barbecues in the summer. And I've definitely noticed that people here value time with loved ones and just their own time far more than their jobs.
So a lot of places that I visited in Europe, I traveled quite a bit. I noticed that in Europe, for example, Germany or, well, France too, but I think Germany is what I noticed the most. They ride bicycle a lot, man, like everywhere. I see them on a tie and a suit, you know, riding their bike to work. I don't know how English is, but in the United States, everybody drives. Nobody rides a bicycle or even walk at all. How is that in comparison with England and Poland?
Yeah, so I would say in England, there's definitely a bit more of it than there is in the States. So I've been in the States 3 times. And every time I'm there, I was very sort of like, wow, literally everyone here drives everywhere. And I remember thinking the first time I went there, I was like, I could drive here because the parking spaces were so big. And I have such a problem with parking my car because, you know, in England, the roads are so narrow and the car parking spaces are so narrow. And even with my tiny little car, I
Right.
always had problems. And I saw the ones in the States. I was like, here I would have no problem driving. But definitely in Poland, I have noticed far more that people cycle and walk wherever they can, at least again here in the outskirts. But I think it's mostly because it's also cheaper. So a lot of people are more money conscious and they think, okay, why would I drive when it's so easy for me to just take a bike there and not have to park and worry about finding parking. And a lot of places have a lot of bicycle lanes and stuff. So,
Well, in
yeah.
a cash society, I will assume you have to be more conscious about your money, right? Oh, that's why they do that, and they rather walk more or, you know, take a bike ride when it's necessary. How about restaurants and, you know, do you guys eating out like in the United States? Eating out is like, it's not a luxury. It's like, you know, going to a restaurant is, people go to a restaurant not even dressing up properly, like very casual and below. You can see people in shorts and flip flops in a restaurant. But in Europe, there is like, you know, it's like a fancy thing, right? So it's in Argentina where I come from. How is it in Poland?
More fancy than casual. It's definitely seen as a treat. It's not normal here for people to sort of see it as a daily, regular way of living. People here very much sort of, even for lunch, for example. So in England, most of the time I would buy lunch out. Like maybe not at a restaurant, like I wouldn't go sit in a restaurant often, but I would pop to like a supermarket and you would have like lunch meal deals and you'd have like ready meals or like pasta or sandwiches and, you know, things like that. Whereas here, no shops have like any kind of meal deals for lunch or anything because it's not normal. People just take their own food to work and it's not common to sort of go out and buy food for work. So I've definitely noticed that my sort of takeaways and my going out to eat have significantly dropped since I've moved here. And even when I order sort of takeaways, people think sort of I do it too often, even though I do it far less than I used to do it in England. So, but that's not to say that people don't do it. You know, there are many restaurants, many takeaway places that thrive, you know, but it's mostly because you have a lot of sort of students and tourists and people do it regularly, but as a treat. So, for example, I try to go every couple of months with my cousin. We go to the next town over and we pick a nice restaurant and we go sit, have some time together. So rather than going every week and it not mean anything, we sort of make it a nice outing.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's not here for sure. People are always eating out. I think in countries like, I'm going to say Argentina again because where I come from, but in big cities like Buenos Aires, you know, they go out and eat more. But out of the big city, that's not a common thing. A lot more home cooking. Even in Buenos Aires, people, only the what they can afford would do that. But yeah, most people cook at home. And eating out is more like a luxury. They're going out. It's a fancy thing. People dress up great, you know, try to look good for it, right? Even when they go to the store, they look good, right?
Oh my God, don't get me started. When I moved here, I couldn't deal with my mum because all the time she's like, you can't go out like that. I'm like, I'm only going out to walk the dog. No, you can't go out like that.
Right.
But in London, like, I could go to the supermarket in my pajamas and no one would
Right.
care. Like, I only did that once. But, you know, the store was at the bottom of my apartment block. So, it was the one opposite, but I just had to go downstairs, walk across the road, go into the shop and come back. Cause like I have a PJ day. I'm not going to like go get dressed up just to go pick up like a pizza or something. Whereas here you have to be properly dressed, your hair has to be done nicely and you have to look
Right.
presentable just to, you know, go to the supermarket.
Right. And Argentina, at least when I grew up in Argentina, it used to be like that. But now that culture is shifting with social media. You know, people are not as fancy anymore. But it's still a thing as heavy as in the US, you know, but still people still dressing up good. But here people go in pajamas to shopping.
Yeah.
In pajamas. They fly in pajamas and flip-flops in the United
I've
States.
seen the
Yeah. I don't
I
know if
find it
that's a
hilarious
thing
on
in
the
Europe,
plane.
but
Yeah.
you've seen it?
Yeah, I find it funny, like when I'm on a plane and I notice like you will have someone who is literally in like PJs and flip-flops or something, and then another woman who you can just tell is Eastern European and she'll be in like a full nice dress and a blazer and high heels and stuff. And I'm just like, we're on the same flight and you have like two completely contrasting people, and I'm somewhere in the middle because I would never get dressed up for a flight, but I'm not going to go as far as like pajamas and flip-flops. But yeah, it's an interesting culture change, and in a way it's nice because, you know, you feel better when you're nice, right? Like I noticed that when I make the effort to, you know, do my hair and makeup, like the rest of the day I feel better and more productive. But then sometimes I'm just like, I just want to be able to go to the shop looking like crap and
Right.
not care that I'm going to meet a neighbor and then I'm going to be the talk of the town for the next week.
Right. You know, I think there's pros and cons about it, right? Sometimes you just want to feel like you don't want to do your hair. I think you should have the right to dress up or not, right? And then the days you want to dress up, you're fine, and nobody will judge you. But in cultures like ours, where if you don't look in a certain way, you get judged, it's a problem, right? But here, at least in the US, you can dress up super nice, or you can dress up very cheap, and nobody cares. you're going to get attention if you dress up nice. Like, more likely people are going to ask you, are you European? That's a fair question they ask you if you dress.
Interesting.
Yes, it happened to my wife is Ukrainian, and it happened to her the first 2 weeks in the U.S. We went to a restaurant and she overdressed, and I wanted to tell her, you overdressed for the U.S., but I knew that she needed to find out for herself, and I also had to dress up to look nice because I wasn't gonna let her look, just to look by himself. But we went to a restaurant and we waiting online. That's another thing. In the US, you got to wait online for a restaurant because they're crowded, super crowded. So we're waiting 20 minutes to get a table, and this couple, they were dressing up very regular, and they're like, guys, sorry for my question, but are you guys European? Because she looks like a model, and they were like blown away. Yeah, those are the cultural differences those are cultural shocks. Sometimes it's hard to adapt. It's hard to adapt.
100%.
It's harder to adapt for an American to adapt to be fancy than a European to adapt to be less fancy, because I think it was a great conversation. We cover culture, we talk about finance, right? If people want to find you, social media, what is the name of your channel and that kind of stuff?
So I'm Panda Boss Anna pretty much on all socials. So YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, you'll find me there. And I talk a lot about finance and sort of the differences between Poland and England, and generally how to help yourself achieve financial independence.
But I love the conversation. I could talk for hours. I mean, there's so many things that we as people that travel or expat or immigrants, we experience that there's hours of things that we can talk about. But
Thank you for
thank you
having
for
me.
your time. Hopefully I get to interview you another time.
Yeah, I loved stuff like this. So definitely, anytime.
We'll do another one. Thank you.
Thank you.